Fear the Walking Dead Rewrite, Season 4, Episode 12, Find Her. Now, this episode would start off, obviously we have these splinter groups that are all searching for Althea, and some of them are kind of getting out of range. However, John and June unfortunately have to kind of keep going, but they do get out of range. But Luciana does say something, is that these roadblocks are kind of forming like a little circle, like a little pyramid here, and it's kind of like, oh God, like, okay, someone trying to like surround us, and that's the messed up part, is that whoever's doing this, it's almost like they're trying to surround them. So obviously this all must be a big plan, because it's all like this one big circle within Morgan and the others and where they're at. So definitely that aspect of things is very, interesting, because it makes you wonder who exactly is doing all this stuff. And then of course they'd be getting out of range, they'd still be looking for Althea, but then John would say, the longer we go without finding out, the chances of finding her get less and less, and then they get shot at. Now obviously we do not know who this is in this version, but someone would be shooting at them, and John would say, hey, we don't want any trouble, and of course they would just barely make it out, as of course some of the windows get shot out and stuff like that. And it's a really cool action scene to kind of start off the episode, and I dig it. I think it's really good. And basically they go to the gulch, and then we have John that's like, welcome to Humbug's Gulch, as you've got like that music, that theme that kind of plays through, and you get introduced to the Humbug's Gulch. Now, obviously, they would go into this building, and you would have John be like, well, it's my last round. I better shoot the door. And then it's like, no, I can get it. And June, of course, opens the door up, and they find all these guns. Now, obviously, they'd be loading these guns up and stuff like that. They'd be kind of finding them, and it'd be like, okay, well, I mean, they found some more guns that, can help them get further, so that's definitely good. Now, then we would also see Alicia and Luciana, and they'd be inside of the car. And in the original version, they're trying to help the kids, and they decide to, like, split off from the group and go look for the kids, which is so stupid in my opinion. And in this scene, we're gonna have them. Luciana talks about how much her arm hurts. Alicia's like, can you move it? And she's like, barely, not really anything. And Luciana would basically say like, hey, like, it was worth it though. Like, all of this, like, it'll be worth it in the end. And Alicia would be like, it's not looking like it yet. And basically Luciana would be like, look, have a little bit more faith. Althea, I'm sure she's fine, and if she's not, then we'll kill whoever did anything. And Alicia would be like, no, don't talk like that. And then Luciana would be like, no, look, this world, I agree, this world, sometimes you can't avoid the realistic side of things. People die, but let's not say that until we know what's going on with Althea. And Alicia would say, okay, fine, let's keep looking. Now, John and June be talking about, hey, like, we can make it back to the car. They were, loading all the guns up and stuff like that. And basically they decide that they're going to try to go for it. They're going to try to make it back to the car. And as they go out, we have, of course, this, like, kind of storm that's going on here. And then we get someone holding a gun. And we're just like, frig. So who the hell is this? And it's kind of like a mystery of like, okay, who is this person? Like, are they going to try to kill John and June? We'll just have to see, but it definitely raises the tension. And then we would get an epic shootout. As June is in one spot, John is behind the car. Of course, the tire would get shot up, and then, of course, John would kind of make a run for it. Now, obviously, June be off, somewhere else. John would be kind of out, like, kind of in the open, and he'd be wondering, okay, where did that guy go? Like, he was just there a few minutes ago. And then a few of the dead come up behind him. He kills them, and when he turns back around, the gun is pointed to him, and it's whoever's been shooting at them. And as John looks a little panicked, we get the transition to Dwight, and he says, where is she? And he's like, I don't know who you mean. Tell me, or I'll put a bullet in your head. Listen, you're gonna have to calm down. Answer me. And June, of course, would knock him out, and then he would say, thank you, Junebug. And she's like, don't thank me yet. Let's get him inside. And so that is exactly what they do. They get him inside, and they're, of course, going to question him. And then, of course, he'd be inside. He'd be tied up. June, of course, be helping him. And we have John that's like, I wonder how he got that scar, though. But John knew right away. And this is what I love about John. He's a very good judge of character. He already knew. He's like, this guy isn't bad. There's a story here. And that's what I really like. He's a very good judge of character. And that's why we all love John, right? Because he's a very good judge of character. He's got a good heart. And he knows a good person when he sees one. And that's what I like, no matter what the circumstances are. So I like that quite a bit. I think that's really cool. And basically, you'd have Dwight that'd be be like, no, like, hey, John, don't touch that. And of course, it's the letters from Sherry, and he'd be like, hey, do not touch that. And John's like, all right. And he'd put the notes down and stuff like that. And basically, he would ask, like, hey, do you know who's doing that, those roadblocks on the road? And Dwight doesn't really look like he knows, but then it kind of looks like he also does. And he looks at John, he's like, look, no one can help me. This whole place is screwed. Now, Luciana and Alicia, they'd be in the car, and Morgan would be like, no, I haven't found anything, like any signs of Althea my way. And Alicia and Luciana would be like, nah, but we'll keep looking. There's still a few roads we have yet to check. And of course, that's what they'd be doing. And then all of a sudden, they get run off the road. And of course, they crash onto the side of the road. And Morgan's like, hey, Alicia, are you guys okay? And it's a very exciting scene. So you're like, okay, whoa, like, why did they just like get run off the road? And of course, they would check, and then they would notice like, frig, someone planted that there. And of course, then Morgan's like, okay, like, stay where you are, I'm coming. And essentially, Alicia and them, and this, in my opinion, definitely makes sense because they want to know where Althea is. They don't know these roads, and unfortunately, like, they would kind of like have no choice. They'd got to keep going. But Morgan is going to try to meet up with them because obviously after hearing that, yeah, things are getting pretty dangerous, and yeah, they want to find Althea, but it can't, they can't go too far and over the top either. And that's why Morgan's going to go find them to make sure they're safe and that they're doing this right. So, of course, then they'd be inside the gulch, and, of course, you'd have them inside the building, and, of course, the walkers are there. They're all, like, banging on the door, and, of course, they're trying to kind of block off the door to make sure they don't get in. But Dwight, of course, would kind of introduce himself, and they would all have a really cool conversation here. I really like the story, how it's like, you're trying to find someone. He tells, John, her name is Sherry, and, I'm Dwight, the whole kind of thing, and how John's just like, hey, like, I'm John Dory, hey, like the fish, that whole kind of thing. And he would explain the story about how, like, when he was looking for June, I mean, he darn near, like, he shot a man's finger off, and he's like, it was only his little finger, though, and then, he's just like, and to be fair, he was an unagreeable asshole, and of course, that is very true. And I really like this scene. I just think it's really cool, and you guys know I'm a big fan of the John and Dwight friendship, so I would keep a lot of this dialogue here. I think it actually is really cool, and they can actually relate because, John was in the place, same place that Dwight is in now, and that's what's really cool about this scene, and that's what I really like about this moment. And they can kind of understand each other, and they kind of come through to each other here, and that's what I really like. I think the two, Austin Emilio and Garrett Delahunt do a great job in this scene, and there's really nothing I would cut from here. I think the dialogue is pretty darn good. So then, of course, they would agree to go out, of course, and try to make it out of this gulch, and that is exactly what they are going to do. So obviously when they'd be out there, they would have to get off the roof because the thing is just not going to hold. Dwight would fall. He would kind of struggle with the walker, of course. He would get the gun, and then he'd be fighting off the walkers. And I really like the small little scene when, John's like, what'd you call them? And he's like, walkers, And obviously it's a connection to the original show, so I think it's actually really cool. It's like, hey, what'd you call them? Hey, walkers, So I think that's really cool as well, too. Now, of course, they'd be fighting off some of the dead. You've got June that she's climbing down. You got John and Dwight. They're fighting off some walkers on the other end. June is kind of covering for them, and then Dwight, of course, and them, they're all trying to kind of get to safety. John and June get to the car, and they get into the car, but Dwight has a moment of hesitation and goes back for the van that he's had as he's been looking for Sherry. Now, obviously, this van is very important to him, so we can understand why he's doing this. Plus, once he gets in there, he even kind of tells them, like, look, this van, like, Sherry had this, like, she drove this. This is the closest I've been in a good long while. It's hard for me to kind of give it up. And I would like this conversation in the car. You could say it's drawn out or there's, scenes in here that could have been trimmed. But for me personally, I really like how John and June kind of tell their stories on how they, like John, he's like, I thought June was dead and I found her, it doesn't mean you can't find Sherry. And, same goes for June, and, she even says, and this is what I like about June here. She says, look, I was at a place where I didn't feel like I deserved for John to find me. I didn't feel like I deserved to, be loved by John and, that kind of thing. And Dwight would kind of, have a moment where he can kind of relate to that. He doesn't feel like he deserves to find Sherry. So June kind of comes through to him, which I think is really cool. And then, of course, you've got like the scene where he's like, man, I've been looking for over a year. And when we find this out, when he says that I've been looking for Sherry for over a year, Holy frig, honestly, you gotta say, this guy is, like, honestly really trying here, and it makes sense on why he doesn't want to give up now. So I definitely think that this scene for his character, going into the van, kind of having second thoughts, I definitely think is in character. I don't think there's anything wrong with this scene. I think after looking for about a year, yeah, any person would find it hard to kind of, like, let go of the one piece that he felt like he was getting close, which is the van, obviously, and stuff like that. Now, then, you know, once they convince him, which is what I really like, then they convince him, and then he's just like, okay, but guys, like, I'm screwed, like, I'm surrounded by the dead. And I love the way John says, oh, you leave that to us, buddy. So that amazing. Honestly, nothing wrong with that scene. I think it's really, really well done, and I think John, as usual, is an absolutely awesome character. Now, Luciana and Alicia would be walking, of course, and they would be talking about, you know, hey, like, do you think we're gonna find Althea? And that's what Alicia asks to Luciana, and Luciana would say, well, Nick found me. After all that time, he managed to find me. He managed to realize that I was actually out there alive. He could have just gave up hope, but he didn't. And I'm not going to give up hope that Althea is alive. And Alicia hearing this would feel kind of emotional because obviously it's Nick, but also kind of happy as well too, because that is true. Nick never gave up hope that Luciana would ever be alive. And we know, yeah, Nick never gave up on Luciana. Even when, you know, she was gone, he still always had that, you know, thought in the back of his mind that she was out there. So that's what Luciana is going to do with Althea. She is also going to hold out hope that, you know, Althea is very much alive. And then you would see Morgan, who would pull up, and of course he would say, like, no, nothing, just more roadblocks, as well as you would also see Amelia, Dean, and Jason also pull up and, you know, meet up with Morgan, Alicia, and Luciana, and Morgan be like, anything? And she would just kind of like, she wouldn't say anything, but she would just nod like, no. And Amelia would say, look, we need to get out of here. We can be out here too long, and when we're out here too long, shit like this keeps happening. We need to head back to the truck stop and figure this out from there, because this, what we've seen today, there's going to be more of this. You all know that. And Morgan would say, yeah, I do. But we have a home to get back, and we need to get there as soon as possible. But I'm not leaving Althea. And Amelia would say, no, but we searched this entire area. So if Althea is not over here, that means she's got to be past those borders. And Morgan would just kind of sit there and say, huh, I hope you're wrong, but you also could be right. And of course, this means that, yeah, there's still another day, no Althea, more roadblocks, and if anything, it's more terrifying now because it's more of a circle around them. So somebody's trying to surround them, and it means that someone's trying to stop them from going in every which direction, except for, you know, kind of a little area. So obviously, it looks like someone, whoever's doing these roadblocks, is trying to kind of surround everybody, which is getting pretty obvious as time goes on. So definitely, who's ever doing this definitely has an ultimate plan. However, then they all decide, okay, let's go meet up with John and June. And then we hear from Dean that he says, you know what, Morgan, honestly, you guys go. I need to keep tabs on this. I mean, hell, someone does. I'll keep tabs on it. I'll check all the other borders out. I'll see what's going on. I'll see if there's any more roadblocks, and I'll report back to you. I'll only be another 30 minutes to maybe about an hour. And Morgan would say, are you sure? And he would say, hey, I gotta earn my keep, right? And Morgan would say, no, you don't need to prove anything to us. And he would say, no, I just feel like I could help. And then Luciana would pipe in and she would say, I can't wait either. I got to find out what this is. And Morgan would be like, Luciana, like, you're still hurt. You're still injured. And she would say to Morgan, I'm fine. I'm going to help Dean. I'm going to help him figure out what this is. We're going to both report information to you by the end of the day. And Morgan would say, okay, be careful. And Morgan would shake Dean's hand and say, keep her safe. And Dean would say, of course. And Morgan would say, all right, let's go. Good luck, you two. And Morgan and the others would get in the truck and they would drive off. Now, this scene obviously would be very, very cool. As John starts to save Dwight, you've got June that kind of covers him from behind. And of course, you've got John that starts shooting the walkers and starts helping Dwight. And, you know, June even says to Dwight, once you see an exit point, you go, okay? And John is shooting these walkers, you know, as fast as he possibly can, trying to save Dwight. Dwight's even helping out. He's shooting a few of the walkers as well, too. June, of course, you know, runs into a few walkers herself. John kind of goes back to make sure she's okay. He notices that June is fine. He goes back. He continues to kill these walkers. And of course, then he, of course, tells Dwight, okay, look, like, you know, you can go now. Dwight gets out. He, of course, starts fighting the walkers with the axe. And then, of course, if you kind of interfere, and then you've got John that starts running out of ammo. Now, he's only got one bullet left. And of course, you've got, you know, Dwight that's there on the ground. So the only option, and this is badass for this character, I'm going to be honest, for John, this is honestly such a cool scene that just proves how freaking capable this guy actually is. And basically he tells Dwight, pick up the axe. He focuses, you got this build-up music, he really focuses, and then as June watches this from behind, you've got Dwight that's, on the ground, pointing the axe as, straight as he possibly can, and then John takes the shot and succeeds and splits the bullet and kills the two walkers in an absolutely awesome fashion. And then we've got Dwight that's just like, holy crap, and same with June. She's just blown away that, John even just did this. And of course he would help him up, and then, John would say, oh, that's the second time in my life I ever did that. And of course they would kind of walk back to the car and they'd be safe now. Now, we would have a really cool scene between John and June and how, he said that, hey, like what you said to Dwight today, even I needed to hear that, and stuff like that. And now I realize what I have, and I realize what, like what I do and what I deserve, and, that whole kind of thing. And of course they would kiss and stuff. And, obviously great relationship. I love the relationship of John and June, so I would definitely keep this scene in here as well. Now, Morgan and the others would show up. Obviously, Luciana and Dean would still be out there, kind of just keeping tabs on these, roadblocks. However, Morgan and them would get out of the vehicle, of course, and they'd be all like, hey, you found some guns and stuff like that. They'd all be talking and stuff. And then you would have Dwight that would show up, and he'd be like, Morgan. And he'd be like, Dwight? And June would say, you two know each other? And in the original version, I was not a fan of how Morgan said, we come from the same place. Not a fan of that at all. So I'm going to cut that, little line out. And instead I'm going to add in, it's a long story. And obviously, yeah, it is a long story. We're not going to recap it here. But obviously Morgan would just say like, yeah, it's a long story. But you can tell through what he says here that he obviously knows him very well. And obviously that proves to the group that if this is someone Morgan knows, we can trust him. And that is all I think needs to be said here. Because honestly, we come from the same place. No, you didn't. You were on the opposite sides. You came from the same show, not the same community, So just the way he words that, not a fan. However, him, kind of just saying like, yeah, it's a long story. It proves to, the rest of the characters that they can trust Dwight. So I think that is honestly really good. And then, Morgan, he would say like, no, Dwight, no, you don't have to say it. I know how it ended for you, but we're all trying to start over. So, and then Alicia would ask, okay, but do you know who's, leaving these, roadblocks on the road? And Dwight would say, believe me, I've had a hard time trying to get through here. So it sounds like Dwight has had the same problem as Morgan and them. And that's what he tells Alicia, like, I've only been able to go through a few, areas, but there's been, a few areas blocked off. But essentially it's his way of saying like, no, he has no idea. So then of course they would ask him, like they'd be like, can you take us there? And then Dwight would of course take them to one of the borders, and they would all be standing there. Obviously they'd be kind of tempted because obviously this has been a going problem, and they have the idea, you know what, screw it, let's just go for it, let's just see what's on the other side. And as they're getting ready to do that, as they're ready to start clearing these walkers, they've got their guns up, they're ready to start clearing this army of the dead, you hear on the walkie-talkie, Mr. Jones? And Morgan and the others would be completely thrown off by this, and someone would say, Mr. Jones, do you copy? And Alicia would hand the walkie-talkie over to Morgan, and he would say, who is this? And it would be the same guy from the end of last episode, and he would say, hello, Mr. Jones. Let me formally introduce myself. I'm Asher. I see y'all been leaving these boxes on the road. It's always nice to see good, decent people around these parts. I mean, you never see them. I mean, hell, I don't think I've seen a pacifist ever since the whole world fell apart, so good on you, Mr. Jones. And Morgan would say, what do you want? And he would say, well, you people obviously are a danger to us. A pretty pathetic one, seeing your philosophy of life, Mr. Jones, but you are still a threat at the end of the day, so I am going to need you all to turn over your weapons and surrender as soon as humanly possible. And Alicia would laugh, and she would take the walkie from Morgan, and she would say, yeah, we're not doing that. And he would say, oh, really? You're not going to do it? And Alicia would say, no, because unlike you people, we actually care about the ones that we have. We actually care about the ones that we are trying to help. You are just a bunch of know-it-all assholes that think you're better than everyone else. And when Asher hears Alicia says this, he says, really? Well, let's ask Luciana what she thinks of that. And Morgan and Alicia and the others would all look panicked. And he would say, I found two of your friends on the road, scouting around. Complete know-it-all pricks, like you just said, Alicia. And Alicia would look angry. Morgan would take the walkie from her, and he would say, don't hurt them, please. And he would look at Dean and Luciana, who they now have captured. They have them tied up, and they have guns pointed to their heads. As you have Asher that's talking to Morgan and the others, a few other bikers have guns pointed to Luciana and Dean's head. And Morgan would say, "You kill them, and there's no turning back from this." I think it's already too late to turn back from anything, Mr. Jones. So what's it gonna be? Surrender? Or I kill your 2 people, and then I make you surrender anyway, so really, there is only one option. Just 2 different ways it can go. Morgan would sit there. Asher would say, "Morgan, what's it gonna be?" And Morgan and Alicia wouldn't know what to do. And he would laugh and say, "You know what?" The music would kind of build up, and he would say, "I'll get back to you." And Alicia and Morgan hear over the walkie gunshots, and they don't know whether or not Asher has just executed and killed Luciana and Dean, and they look terrified. Amelia starts freaking out as they hear gunshots over the walkie-talkie, and they don't know what happened, and they don't know if Luciana and Dean have just been executed. And Morgan looks super panicked, Alicia looks pissed off, and they all look super terrified as they don't know if Luciana and Dean just got killed, but they also look pissed off because they have just been in a predicament where they can't get out. And now Morgan looks pissed off more than ever. Alicia looks at Morgan as Morgan is trying to keep it together, but he looks like he's ready to lose his mind. And Alicia would say, "So what the hell do we do now?" Amelia would start crying. John and June would look pissed off. Alicia would also look pissed off, but as she asks Morgan, "So what the hell do we do now?" Morgan would look at her with a very, very psychotic look on his face and say, "We clear." So that was Fear the Walking Dead, Season 4, Episode 12, Find Her. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Obviously, the title of this episode is a reference to the last words Daryl told Dwight, which is to find her, which obviously now, well, we know it's been about a year and he still hasn't found Sherry. So obviously that is, not going so well for Dwight. He's with the group now though, but now as, John and June took him in, as we see everything go down there, we do see that now Luciana and Dean, as, Dean was trying to earn his keep and Luciana was trying to figure out what was going on with these, borders, they unfortunately get caught by the Proctors and by this new character, which we saw last episode, named Asher. And obviously now the question is, have they just been executed? Have Luciana and Dean been executed? Obviously, from Morgan and the others' perspective, they are very worried about it. And now it's really tempting the group to just fully go at the Proctors. And obviously, from what Morgan said, we don't hear him say that very often. But Morgan, yes, did just say he wants to clear. He has had enough of the Proctors. They've been messing them around. They've now captured them. They've, from their perspective, killed Luciana and Dean. And obviously, we're just going to have to see how it works out. But Morgan and the others, at least Morgan, we'll have to see about the others. But it does look like the group is just 100% fed up of being messed around with by the Proctors. And now, obviously, what they still don't know is that their home has just been completely burned down. So we'll have to see how that goes. That is this episode of Fear the Walking Dead Rewrites. And stay tuned, guys, because in 2 weeks, coming up is Fear the Walking Dead Season 4, Episode 13, Still Standing. Thanks for watching.
See, somebody help me. That's what this is all about.
The universe has tested us in no uncertain terms. There's a utility to that. One becomes born to something else. Survivor.
Just tell me where you're from, where you are, what you're doing out here. With this symbol. 3 circles.
If you see someone wearing this jacket, you should be afraid. We are a force who are not living for ourselves or for now.
You see where the helicopter came from?